Okay, well, hello everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to present at the conference. My talk today is Food Security, Urban Agriculture, and the Principles of Permaculture Design. This is based on a report that I wrote in 2005, but has been updated to reflect our current circumstances. So a little bit about me. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is located in the middle of the United States. Like you, we're experiencing some very cold weather and anticipate having some more snow over the next few days. So just trying to stay warm here. So I'd like to start with our current situation. As you know, the IPCC released a report in October indicating that we have 12 years to limit the worst effects of climate change. So certainly the urgency of our situation has changed. Our population has grown. When I wrote my report initially, we had 6.5 billion people on Earth. Today, we're looking at 7.5 billion people who need to eat. The population distribution has changed. 55% of humans are in urban areas, and that's expected to increase to 68% by 2050. And of our population, 8.3% is located in 37 megacities around the world. And megacities are cities with populations in excess of 10 million people. So our farming situation has changed as well. As you know, with the evolution of agriculture from small family farms that produce a diversity of food, it's changed to large industrial agricultural systems, and that continues to grow. Small farmers continue to be displaced. They're forced to give up their land and migrate to cities in search of livelihoods. That has led to a continued inequitable distribution of food, which has contributed to hunger crises and social instability, especially for the urban poor. The result has been increasing food insecurity. So just so that we are all on the same page here, what is food security? And this is the definition that I always go back to, that I like the best. Community food security is a condition in which all community residents obtain a safe, culturally acceptable, nutritionally adequate diet through a sustainable food system that maximizes community self-reliance and social justice. And I like this photograph. I took this photograph in Beijing, China. It was outside the apartment complex I lived in. These fish were hanging from the clothesline in preparation for some meal that people were beginning to prepare. So the key points around food security is that everyone has access to food at all times. Agricultural practices need to be sensitive to the health and well-being of people and to the environment. Achieving food security requires a community effort with the support and encouragement of state and national officials. Now in Indiana, we're very lucky that that kind of support has grown over the years, so that now we have strong municipal support. We have the Indy Food Council, which has emerged in the last couple of years, and it's a collaborative effort that represents many people, organizations, and businesses, and I'm a member of that effort. We have government support, growing government support. Our Congressman Andre Carson has submitted legislation to address food deserts, and our local city and county officials are doing the same. And what's really exciting is the academic support that food security is getting. Purdue University, which is Indiana's land-grant school, they offer an urban agriculture certificate program that anybody can sign up for. And they offer a small farm conference. It's a day-long conference that happens every March. And this year they've added an urban agriculture learning track. Also, the university that's located near my neighborhood, they, about 10 years ago, started the Center for Urban Ecology. And as part of that effort, they started the CUE farm. And I was an original consultant on that effort when they first started, and it's an amazing place now. So to achieve food security and self-reliance, it is possible to produce what we need, plus extra, thus reducing our dependence on global food systems. Neighborhoods and communities, which range from 300 to 1,000 people, provide natural divisions within cities to engage community-scale permaculture. So urban agriculture, as we can see, is key to food security. Now, urban agriculture, to define that, again, so that we're operating off the same, from the same language, it's a farming activity it's basically farming in the city, and it includes cultivation of food and cash crops, animal husbandry, forestry, and the production of flowers and garden plants. Um, you might be surprised that urban agriculture is the biggest industry in most of the world's cities. And in the United States, farms in metropolitan areas account for more than a third of all crop and livestock sales. So basically, we know that people have always grown food in or near cities. Eating local has always been the norm. This is a view of an urban farm in downtown Indianapolis. Now, I always love this statistic. In the mid 1800s, virtually all of the food available to the 1 million residents of New York City was produced within 7 miles of the city. Basically, what that means in the mid 1800s, that was the distance a horse could travel in a day. And as we know, New York City has now grown into one of those 37 megacities. Now, Indiana has always been at the forefront of urban agriculture. When we look at US history and World Wars I and II, urban gardens were seen as critical to conserving resources. In 1943 alone, Victory Gardens produced 40% of all US vegetables. Indiana was home to one of the largest World War I state campaigns. Everyone had the political will to grow food. Today, as we know, the stakes are much higher. And issues that weren't always issues back in the mid 1900s here are issues now. The challenges that we face with urban agriculture, and some of those challenges include soil contamination in cities, such as lead. This image, the Garden Safe Garden Well Guide, is a publication that we produce in Indianapolis for urban gardeners. Land use and ownership. Often there are competing interests, especially if land becomes more valuable. People want to develop it, which means less land for growing food. Sometimes there's instances of theft of produce, stealing food. If someone's hungry, you can't blame them. Also, there's always an issue of access to water and clean soil. There was a school garden in Los Angeles I knew about. They couldn't find access to clean soil so they could start their garden, and it was very expensive to buy. But we know that we can grow food in the city. You just have to be prepared for the challenges that you might encounter. And I won't go into any of these challenges any deeper because it would take multiple presentations to cover some of those issues. So how does all of this connect with permaculture? Well, we know the basic principles: earth care, people care, and fair share. Permaculture principles and urban agriculture naturally address such principles as such as responding to change, obtaining a yield, using renewable resources, producing no waste, and valuing diversity. So why permaculture? Well, it provides us with a common language to define our work, and it offers us a roadmap to adaptation and resilience in a changing world. The result is continuous, bountiful, shared harvests. Permaculture can help us restore and reinforce ecosystem services that we depend on. Examples: soil and water that have been contaminated by chemical and petroleum products can be restored over time. And permaculture provides an ecological framework for urban food production. So now I'd like to turn our attention to a case study of what could be possible if an urban neighborhood were to adopt permaculture and urban agriculture as a way to food security. So this neighborhood is Rocky Ripple. It's a small Indianapolis neighborhood consisting of 322 households. The population is about 606, so that fits our definition of a logical division of a perfect size for doing a community-wide project. And we're located about 705 feet above sea level. My next image, you get a sense of some of the geographic features of this neighborhood. So on three sides of the neighborhood, we are surrounded by water, the White River and the canal. So the White River is on the north and west side of town, and then on the east side is the canal. The canal provides city water for Indianapolis residents. The red dot in the middle is our community garden. We have 20 to 30 families who participate in that. We have an urban farm, as I mentioned earlier, at Butler University, which is located at the bottom of the picture, the yellow dot. And that big block of green are the Butler's athletic fields. And so, as I mentioned, Butler University is located right next to Rocky Ripple. So we have a great resource right next to our community. So additional features of our community, we have 192 acres of land, which is 0.3 square miles. And you'll have to do the math to convert that to kilometers. We have excellent soil. It's a little bit sandy, but it's excellent soil because of our proximity to the river. We are technically in a flood zone. So the bad news is without the levee, we could flood. The good news is because we're in a flood zone, we do have excellent soil, and we have not been plagued with the issues of contaminated soil like other parts of the city have been. Our terrain is flat to gently rolling, so it makes it easy for growing food. We are in a temperate climate zone. That means we have 4 distinct seasons: spring, summer, winter, and fall. So to nourish every person in Rocky Ripple with a largely vegetarian diet on a sustainable basis without the intensive use of fertilizers and pest controls would require about 123 total acres. So that means it would require a willingness among everyone to shift to a mostly vegetarian diet. I know not everyone wants to do that, but if we all want to eat, we have to make some hard decisions. So existing land usage, our built infrastructure takes up about 27 total acres. Of that, our homes, our houses and structures take up about 12 acres of land based on my calculations, and roads take up about 15 acres of land. So of the 165 total acres that we have, that leaves about 165 acres of land that we can cultivate, which is 42 more than would be required. Now, one thing you might have noticed on that map of our community is we have a lot of tree cover. I do consider that a public access, in that trees, as you know, provide a cooling effect through transpiration during the summer, and it also provides windbreaks during the winter. And with the extreme cold that's coming later this week, we'll appreciate those windbreaks. And so one thing we could do is to make more of those trees, I guess, useful for food production. We could consider some selective harvesting of trees and replacing those trees with native food trees, such as oak, walnut, persimmon, juneberry, elderberry, pawpaw, and pecan. Some of those are species that are unique to the United States. The wood and tree debris then of those that were removed could be used for building, fencing, and hugelkultur. Now, for shady areas, now clearly we know that shady areas can be difficult for growing food, but there are a number of shade-loving, nutritious, culinary, and medicinal native plants that will survive under trees. And as we know, weeds can provide food and medicines for us, as well as habitat for beneficial insect species that we need for pollination services and pest control. The image here is purslane, which loves growing in disturbed soil, and you can eat it raw, or I like to eat it sauteed. It has a nice nutty flavor, but it's highly nutritious, and it's more nutritious than some of the cultivated plants, garden plants that we might want to grow. So as far as sunny areas in our community, that would provide the space for the most intensive food production. Lawns, municipally owned lots like our large park that is adjacent to our community garden. The community garden is located centrally in town, as you saw in the map, and it does include a 10-foot by 30-foot season extending hoop house. Hoop houses, as you know, are essential to creating microclimates so that we can increase our yields by extending our growing season. So in order to make all of this possible, we have to practice climate smart agriculture. Now, if this is a term you're not familiar with, climate smart agriculture helps guide our actions needed to transform and reorient agricultural systems to effectively support development and ensure food security in a changing climate. The objective is sustainably increasing agricultural productivity and incomes, adapting and building resilience to climate change, and reducing and or removing greenhouse gas emissions where possible. If we're eating and growing close to home, we're not burning greenhouse gases. So we need to extend our growing season, as I mentioned before, by creating this microclimate. So as I mentioned, Rocky Ripple is not suited to four-season agriculture, and therefore we need to use hoop houses and other season extension methods to create suitable microclimates. So for residents who don't have very much land, like some people have a lot of land around their home, others do not. Those without land can always support the effort by helping those with a lot of land so that everybody is contributing to the effort. Our lots and open spaces can be redesigned to maximize edible plant growth for vertical and horizontal growing. We can create raised beds and employ and use companion planting techniques. One common example here in the States is corn, squash, and beans. They grow well together, and they provide nutrients for each other. Everyone, of course, can compost organic material from each household to enhance soil quality and increase soil fertility, which, as you know, leads to higher yields and less waste. Small animal husbandry, chicken and rabbits are always an important part of permaculture systems. They supply protein for people and nutrients for the soil. They, as you know, they require little maintenance, and yet they can provide ongoing year-round sources of food, especially nutrient-dense food. So grains and dairy, that's will be more of a challenge in an urban setting, primarily because residential space is too limited for large-scale production. So to work around that, we can develop partnerships with partners who are, or I'm sorry, with farmers who are located in rural areas outside of Indianapolis who can grow those crops and provide those crops to Rocky Ripple residents. And in exchange, we can help support their livelihoods. And we can do that through barter or through financial transactions. So, as we can see, permaculture is key to creating food security. There was a report that was released just this month, Food in the Anthropocene, the Eat Lancet Commission on Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems. And in that report, they said food is the single strongest lever to optimize human health and environmental sustainability on Earth. We're talking about nothing less than a radical transformation of the global food system. This requires nothing less than a new global agricultural revolution. So the question I leave with you all today is, do we have the political will to transform our food system? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. So now we have 10 minutes for questions.
Okay.
Yes.
I hope I didn't talk too fast.
That's okay. I managed to translate.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were doing simultaneous translation. Okay.
No problem. Okay. Now I'm passing the questions. Yeah.
Чи не вважає вона, що вирощування їжі в межах мегаполісів є досить таким невдячною справою, не стільки із-за того, що туди поставлять ресурси, такі як воду, це досить таке енергію, це досить затратна справа, скільки в тому, що населення цих мегаполісів воно в більшості, в половині випадків, скоріш за все, буде деструктивно відноситись до цього процесу. Власне, воно буде нарадіобствувати, воно буде знищувати ці посадки і так далі.
Я зрозумів.
І в більшій мірі, чи не вважає вона, що в більшій мірі слід сконцентрувати свої зусилля на тому, щоб розукрупнити місця. Скажімо так, було б недоцільно, було б з точки зору бізнесу, і взагалі, в Лос-Анджелесі в якомусь гетто вирощують з одної сторони овочі, і рядом вже є якась Сакраменто, і щось інше, де, в принципі, воно більш підходить до таких самих.
Я зрозумів. So, the question is, можна я питання передам? So, first of all, we would like to thank you for this very informative presentation. And the question is, what do you think? Is it really reasonable to grow food in the cities, regarding that many inhabitants, residents of mega cities might have not constructive approach towards growing the food in the city, so they may not eat it or buy it, or they may destroy it, vandalism, and also may it be better if we would rather select an approach to dividing big cities into the smaller towns, let's say, which are self-sufficient itself, because they well, that's more natural for them to be self-sufficient and to grow food in the close to the towns.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I know clearly in mega cities, there are greater challenges just because there's so much more built environment. But on the other hand, you can construct raised beds, and if you don't have access to soil, there are soilless growing mediums that can be used to grow food. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I spent about 6 months in Beijing and Beijing, China, and one of the things I was there to teach English, but while I was there, I was always looking for examples of people producing their own food, and you had to look very closely. But even in the small apartment complex that I lived in the middle of the city, someone was growing corn. I don't know who they were, and I saw some beans growing in another little area in the common area between the apartments. I also was able to find a farmer's market. So there were some relationships that were being developed between people in the cities and people in the rural areas. As you know, people around the world are becoming more and more concerned about food quality. So I think that as more people become aware of the issues around food, that they're going to look for ways to find higher quality food that's not contaminated. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so he got an idea. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Ще є питання? Стільки часу.
Що вона думає про забруднення важкими металами і небезпечність? Можливо, небезпечність їжі в місті.
So we already raised this question in one of the presentation. So what do you think about soil contamination in the cities and possible contamination of the food grown on this soil with pollutants?
Yeah, so I think the bigger issue, so yes, soil contamination is a huge issue. So to give you
ґрунту це дуже серйозне питання.
So to give you an example, in Indianapolis, where I am, okay, I'm going to talk about lead contamination. Where I grow, we do not have an issue with lead contamination. In a garden project that I was involved with several years ago, the lead concentration was 200 parts per million. Now, the Minnesota state extension says that a safe level for children exposed to soil or lead in soil is 40 parts per million. So clearly 200 exceeds that. Now in Indianapolis, the closer you go to the city center, the higher those concentrations are. I've heard of one place where it was high as 2,000 parts per million. Now the issue is not so much around plants taking up lead into the plant itself. Instead, the issue is human exposure to lead. So lead, we can be exposed to it through inhalation, through touch, and through ingestion, through accidentally eating it. So the key here is to cap that soil, to protect that soil, the contaminated soil, so that people are not exposed to it. There's an urban farm south of downtown Indianapolis. It is located on what we call a brownfield, which is contaminated soil. It has high lead and other contaminants. What they did to fix that situation so that they could grow food on that farm, it's about 3 acres, is they brought in ground up tree branches. So every time we have a storm and a tree gets knocked down, all that stuff gets ground up into mulch. So to start that farm, they put 3 feet of tree mulch over 3 acres to cap that soil so that nobody would be exposed to the contaminants. Then on top of all that mulch, they added another 2 feet of clean fill dirt. And they were able to buy that from a farm in southern Indiana that was being developed into a housing, So to protect people from that contaminated soil, they ended up with 5 feet of material on which to grow their crops. And so that farm is a thriving farm. They've been there for, probably 5 or 6 years now. So that's one way to address the issue of contaminated soil.
Thank you very much. Чи є якісь ще запитання? Okay, thank you very much, Angela. Very inspiring presentation. In Ukraine, we are naturally still growing a lot of food in the cities, but now people are a bit losing this sense. They're trying to become more Western, and our task is to say them that this is okay and this is trendy, let's say.
Right. Well, and all I could say is do what works best for you in your climate and in your situation.
Будь ласка, робіть те, що найкраще для вас при вашому кліматі і в вашій ситуації. Thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you.
Contribution. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Так,